Welcome to our graduate case studies. I'm Dr. Rebecca Troy, owner and founder of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain, and we are just thrilled that every other week we have the opportunity to celebrate one of our client graduates. And so before we get started, I wanted to just kind of tell you a little bit more about why we do these things, and then really highlight these cases. So for a lot of you, it can be really hard to get the diagnosis of dyslexia, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment and overwhelm that comes with that diagnosis. And for a lot of people, there are stories out there that there's just absolutely nothing that you can do, and that this is something that you have to experience for the rest of your life, and that is just simply not true. So by putting these cases out here week after week, we hope that it gives you hope and inspiration about what is really possible with the power of neuroplasticity and through our brains. So today we're going to celebrate our client Adeline, who was 10 years old at the time that she went through the program. But specifically, I'll just kind of give you a highlight of her data. So she went from being 50% accurate to 96% accurate in 3 months' time. Her scores in reading on the wide range achievement test 5, so these are norm referenced assessments, these are not ones that we make up. It went from the 8th percentile to the 73rd in 3 months' time, and her spelling went from it looks like the 10th to the 50th percentile, again within that span of 3 months. And so, a quote from Katie, the mom, she said, "I hope that this story helps some of you make the decision to do this program with your kids, because it's been really valuable for us. It's based in neuroscience, which was so different than the tutoring and the other programs that Addie was doing in school. This was actually addressing the underlying issue." So everything that we are about to talk about is something that Katie and Addie did in their home. So my background is in neuroscience and reading disability. I used to teach reading specialists at the university to become reading specialists. And dyslexia is huge in our family. I have 2 dyslexic children myself. And so one of the things that was really, really powerful for me as a mom was the ability to know exactly how to intervene with my kids. And it ended up that, like, holy cow, we need to take this to a much bigger audience, and parents need to have the same tools that I had to be able to intervene with my children, who are now very, very successful in school. And so everything that we're about to share is what Katie and Adeline did in 10 to 15 minutes every single day for 3 months' time. So that will hopefully give you some context into what we're doing. So before we get going, I want you to just have a deeper understanding of the neurobiological differences of dyslexia, because a lot of people really don't know about this. And to be honest, this is one of the most fundamental things that you as a parent of a child with dyslexia need to know in order to get them the right help. So when we look at the definition of dyslexia, it is a specific learning condition that is neurobiological in origin. And what I mean by that is, if you take a look at this image here, you've got 2 fMRIs side by side. So this one right here is of a person without dyslexia. And this one on the right is a person with dyslexia during a language task. So what that means is that we've asked this person to spell something or read something, and this is how their brain responds. So I want you to notice the differences between these 2 images. So back here in this back part of the brain, which we call the occipital lobe, you'll notice that a person without dyslexia has got activity here, and the person with dyslexia does not. And so what that means is that this is the vision part of the brain. If our eyes are up here and I see the word cat, my eyes take in that information, and there's literally nothing in the back of my brain to help me to process those letters. So that's why when I take that in, one of those letters might be missing. I might be adding letters that don't belong. I might be engaging with that with that word in a way that's inappropriate. And you'll also notice that over the ears in what we call the parietal temporal lobes of the brain, a typical person has got activity and there's far less in the person with dyslexia. So by definition, this is just a change in how the brain is processing language. So if we had these two people side by side during any other task, eyes are just at rest, we wouldn't notice that there's any differences. But when we are asking for a language task, we absolutely see that there are neurological changes. So I'll show you the same thing in an EEG. Again, the typical reader's got activity on the sides and in the back. A reader with dyslexia does not have the same activity, but this is what happens after remediation. So the powerful thing that I really want you to get across is that the brain is pliable. We used to think that the brain was static and you have this intelligence and it's always going to stay that way. And we know unequivocally that that is absolutely not true. The brain can change depending on how we respond to it. So you'll notice that after you do remediation, you are able to help the brain to build connections in areas that were inactive before. So the reader with dyslexia was unable to activate this back part of the brain, and there was far less on the sides. But if you look at after remediation, you are absolutely able to engage in those areas so that they're able to read and spell typically. So everything that we're about to share happens because we're able to teach the brain how to use these areas. So I want you to know kind of from the human level what this was like for Katie and Adeline. So I'm sure as you're listening to this, you will probably resonate with a lot of this, and maybe you even see yourself in this situation. So for Addie, she was diagnosed with dyslexia as a first grader. So this was during COVID when Katie was trying to homeschool her. It became apparent that something was really different and it was very, very difficult. So she went in and had a diagnosis for her. And at that time, she was given a dyslexia specific diagnosis. So right away in first grade, they began special education support for her. So when we met her, she was in the fourth grade. So she had special ed support first grade, second grade, third grade, and the beginning of fourth grade. And Katie said, we had a really wonderful special education teacher that really supported her. She loves her, but she wasn't making a whole lot of progress. So Katie also invested in private tutoring for Adeline. She said, which was helpful, but the progress was really, really slow. She was still struggling a lot. And so in fourth grade, she said, as she was getting into higher grade levels, things started to get more difficult. She was supposed to be reading books, like actual novels. She was expected to do book reports, and it started becoming really apparent that it was super frustrating for her. And she said it was frustrating for us too, to see that she wasn't on the same level with her peers. It hurt us as parents too. It's very hard to see. And so I would say that this is really common for a lot of our families where they learn that yes, we are doing interventions. It's not like we're just standing by and doing nothing, but the things that we're doing are not necessarily getting to the root causes, which is those differences in the brain that we were just talking about. So Katie said, as a healthcare provider myself, she is a nurse. She said, I know the notions of neuroplasticity. And to me, traditional special education and tutoring just wasn't tapping into that neuroplasticity. So she said, I knew that more was possible for her brain, and I wanted a program that was going to address that. So when I came across your program and you were talking about truly helping the brain make connections, I was like, that's the issue. It's not that she's not smart or that she needs more repetition, because if repetition was the issue, it would have been corrected after 3 years of traditional approaches. And so, it didn't. And, she didn't make that progress. But, when given the opportunity to get at that root issue, she made exponential progress in just 3 months. So she said, we know that kids with dyslexia have brains that work differently, which is great and beautiful and wonderful, and we don't need to change that, but we just want to help them succeed in the worlds that we're in, keeping their beautiful extras, but making things a little bit easier for them academically. So she said it was just really great timing. I already had this belief in neuroplasticity, and we can train the brains to work differently and in new ways. And I think that's exactly what it did. She said Adeline's data was really fun to see. We also saw that her confidence really increased a lot. She's definitely more willing to try reading, whereas before she really didn't. Reading was just so difficult for her that she didn't even bother trying unless she had to for school. So it's been really fun to see the changes, thank goodness. Also, for her to be average in spelling is a huge, huge win. She said now she can spell most everything phonetically, if not correctly, which honestly she couldn't at all before. Often when you're reading a child's writing, you can usually figure out what they're trying to say, but many times with Addie, we couldn't because she would just put random letters in there. That phonetic link was missing before, which is not helping her both in reading and her spelling. And so I think therein lies the benefit of actually teaching the brain to connect sight and sound together. So, you can definitely see Katie's interview. We've got it posted on YouTube, but she had some really lovely things to say about how, you know, before when they did the 3 years worth of tutoring and special education, it just wasn't getting to the underlying issue. So they definitely did programs that were, touted to be for dyslexia. But it absolutely did not move her beyond the 8th percentile. So she said, it's not difficult stuff. You'll be refreshed. It's easy, and you'll be surprised that it helps you in the way that it does. But as a parent, it was relief because I had a full plate. I'm not a teacher, but I was able to do this as a nurse because we got walked through step by step. It's not hard, and it made a huge difference. So within 10 to 15 minutes a night, it actually became this little bonding routine for Addie and I. We looked forward to it, and it was fun, wasn't frustrating. It was easy. Nothing was overwhelming. And she said, I'm happy to put our story out there because I think if you're struggling, it's a great program. I definitely think you should do it. So let's dive into her data, and I want to talk you through why it's so powerful to see the real evidence of brain change in real time. So again, everything that you're looking at happened within 3 months' time. So in phonological awareness, that's the brain's ability to actually hear sounds without seeing them. So we gave Addie a test that said, okay, the word is baseball, Addie. Take away ball, what's left? And so when she did that test, she was only 50% accurate, which means that her brain was really struggling to hear and manipulate sounds. Another example is like, okay, Addie, the word is Germany. Take away ma, what's left? And so she has to picture that word in her brain. She has to know that ma is the middle sound and say, oh, journey. That's the word. So for a kiddo with dyslexia, that mental Olympics of having to visualize the word, attach it to the sounds, and then be able to manipulate that is really difficult because the brain isn't using those areas like we talked about. So she went from only being 50% accurate to 96% accurate in 3 months' time. So absolutely through the repetition and through the neural work that we did in the program, she was able to massively change her brain's relationship with language, which had obviously a very strong effect on everything else that followed. So her reading on the wide range achievement test, she started at the 8th percentile, which means that she was able to decode words better than 8 out of 100 kids her age at the time that she started. 3 months later, she was able to decode words better than 73 out of 100 of her same age peers. So well above average in her ability to do that, massively changing her relationship with reading, but also her confidence. So mom just said, oh my gosh, it was such a huge change to see her actually make leaps like that. And the same thing with spelling. So she ended at the 50th percentile, being exactly average. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but she was actually able to spell all of the words. Phonetically, she was at the 98th percent accuracy with that, but she just, missed a letter or two here and there with the pattern, but just incredible, incredible gains. So as I mentioned, having massive errors before, really, really shifting how that brain responds. But I want to show you what this looks like from a statistics standpoint. So maybe you don't look at educational statistics all the time, but here's why this data is so, so powerful and why you really, really want to have an intervention that closes the gap. So what you're looking at right now is called the normal distribution curve, but it's the way that we would expect data to look. And right in the middle is the 50th percentile, or what we would consider to be average. So researchers in education have studied and studied all kinds of different interventions for decades. And we know that an average growth metric for an entire school year is a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So what that means is, let's just say that your kiddo is here at this red line at the beginning of first grade. We would expect that by the end of the first grade, they would have grown to this blue line here, or a 0.3 of a standard deviation. If they start fourth grade, we would expect that they would grow this 0.3 by the end of fourth grade. So there's a typical amount of progress that a kid makes. But oftentimes, if your kiddo has dyslexia, they're making less than the expected progress. So everybody else keeps moving up and keeps moving up, and your child kind of stays in that same place over and over, year after year. And so what you really need is some kind of an intervention that is going to move your child and actually close the gap. So this green line right here is what we would call moderate statistical significance. It's a 0.5 of a standard deviation, and this orange squiggly line here is a 0.8. So this is where we would say there is a statistically significant difference. We've almost moved this child an entire standard deviation from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year. We know that this is a very, very positive impact. We can say with certainty that this program has had a statistically significant impact on their progress. So let's take a look at Addie's specifically, and we'll kind of talk about why this is so, so powerful. So she started here at the 8th percentile. So if she would have made the progress that we would expect her to make in an entire school year, she would have grown to right here. So like I mentioned, oftentimes kids with dyslexia don't even make that progress, and they just kind of stay in the same place year after year after year. If this program would have had a statistically significant impact, meaning we know with confidence that we helped to close the gap, she would have grown right here. But instead, Addie grew 1, 2.5 standard deviations in 3 months' time, which is why we're like, this is so amazing. We need to shout this from the rooftops, because this is the power of actually rewiring how the brain responds to language. So when we got to the root cause and we showed Addie's brain how to actually hear the sounds in the word and connect them properly to the symbol that
Hello there.
she is able to do that quickly.
Alrighty.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm trying to.
I just have to mute somebody. Sorry. If you are unmuted, if you could please do that. I'm sorry. I think I got it. Okay, perfect. So one of the reasons that we think that this is just so, so powerful to share is, again, she made a massive leap in closing the gap. So if your kiddo has been sitting at the same spot year after year after year, and their confidence is going down, and they're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to grow and things are never going to change, it is so, so powerful and such a confidence boost to, within 3 months' time, blast all the way up here to, almost to high average in her ability to decode words. So just super, super confidence builder. And the same thing was true for spelling for Adeline as well. Again, starting down here in the 5th percentile, if she would have grown what was typical within an entire school year, she would have been here, but she made it all the way to spelling on average at the 50th percentile. So massive, massive leaps. And again, because she spelled words phonetically, but maybe it was an EE pattern and she put the EA instead. Had she had those patterns correct, she would have been at the 98th percentile. So it's just so, so powerful. And the story that we really, really want you to know about is that the brain absolutely can change if you have a child with dyslexia. So please don't let anybody tell you that you have to stay in struggle mode forever and you just have to deal with it, because it's simply not true. This is a real human who had an incredible experience within 3 months by just actually getting in and addressing the root cause, which was the fact that her brain wasn't responding to language. And once we showed her how to do that, she was able to make massive, massive leaps. So I do want to say that none of this would have happened had Katie not partnered with us. So it is not for everybody. We don't take in everybody. We take in mamas who are willing to partner with us and do this consistently. So Katie remained consistent with that 10 to 15 minutes, and she did the program as prescribed. She was consistent with that. She was able to do this within 3 months because she not only did what we asked her to do, but she leaned into our coaching and support. She made it fun. She celebrated Addie. She celebrated her small wins. She went full in with this belief that neuroplasticity can work. She was decisive, coachable, resourceful, and she continued to believe that greater things were possible for her daughter. So had she not done that, I mean, there is no magic wand that you can wave over a child and say like, oh, poof, all of these things are going to massively change. It came through hard work. And so we do want to celebrate Katie for partnering with us throughout this process. But she just said it was great timing, and I already had this belief in neuroplasticity, and we can train our brains to work differently and in new ways. And I think that's exactly what it did. So just super, super powerful. But I do want to just highlight that Katie's data and Adeline's data are not an anomaly. This is typical for what happens when you actually address the root cause. So like I said, this 0.3 is what we would expect a typical kid to grow in over an entire school year. If you have an intervention that makes a 0.8 of a standard deviation of growth, it means, like, statistically speaking, you have made a huge shift in their data. Our average client in the program makes double that because we address the root causes. And so we shout this from the rooftops every other Tuesday. We are on celebrating one of our graduates because it's just so, so powerful to be able to share this information. So if you want to dig more into statistics and you want to know more about standard deviations, there's a citation down here. John Hattie is a researcher who's done a ton of meta-analyses, which are studies of studies. So if you want to dig more into this, please feel free. You can copy the citation and kind of dig more in. But overall, I want to really get out the message of why it is critical for us to be closing this gap and to have an intervention that is going to make more than typical progress. Because if you don't, and you just stay in the same spot over and over and over again, you inevitably miss opportunities. So whether that is, hey, I have to go to 30 to 45 minutes to an hour worth of intervention every single day, a couple of days a week, no matter when it is or whatever interval, you are missing time with your peers. You might be missing recess. You might not be able to take an elective class that you want to take because now you have to take reading support class. Or maybe you're missing opportunities because you have to sit there for homework for 2 to 3 hours a night, and your sibling or your friends are taking 10 to 15 minutes. And so no matter what it is, there are opportunities that you miss because your brain is continuing to struggle. You have current and ongoing struggles in other things. There are future opportunities that you may miss, and there are other people that suffer because of this. So it's never just the child with dyslexia that struggles, it is the entire family. So if that's you as the parent who has to sit next to your child while they're on the floor crying, or they're in tears day after day, or they're angry or they're frustrated or whatever it might be, that absolutely has an impact on the entire family. And so why it's critical to make as much progress as humanly possible is because it impacts so much. And when you can close the gap and you can do exactly what Katie and Addie did, where you are making massive leaps, it improves your academic performance, it increases your self-esteem and confidence, it gives you overall better mental health, greater access to opportunities. And so we want to invite you to learn more about this. If you are somebody that is out there now and you're not sure if your child has dyslexia, that in and of itself can be a really difficult journey to navigate. We do have a dyslexia discovery workshop that you can do at home, and in less than 20 minutes, you can do assessments to figure out, is that really what I'm dealing with? So without having to go get a neuropsych evaluation, without having to spend thousands there, you can figure out those things with norm referenced assessment data, and we can help you to do that. So if you're in that spot and you are still trying to figure out, is this really what I'm dealing with? Send us a comment, send us a message, and we will help you to get that workshop underway so that you can figure those things out. Also, if you are a parent out there who is probably trying multiple things now, it's very rare that, and sometimes we meet families who just found out, like, gosh, this is a brand new diagnosis and it feels super overwhelming. That can be true too. But for most of our families, they've been through things before, and they've done tutoring and they've been getting support, and they're just not making progress. I would invite you to have a complimentary call with our team, and we'll walk you through the application process to see if this is a fit for you to be able to work with us too, because it is absolutely common and possible that when you address the root cause of how the brain is actually struggling with language, and you teach the brain to connect what you see and what you hear together, you build those superhighways in the brain, you can too have the same types of results that Addie did within 3 months' time.